Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit us at www.crosswindchurch.net, or you can email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
So about 16 years ago or so, I had a professor that encouraged me to participate in a little activity. In fact, you may want to say this and jot this down as something you want to participate in. It's really helpful to me. He said, look, there's going to come a time when you get out of school, when you enter the real world, you have to become a grown-up, and where certain things are going to vie for your time and vie for your attention. And it's a lot easier now that you don't have all of those things pulling at you for you to kind of determine what your priorities are and where your priorities are going to lie. He said, so what I need you to do is take out a piece of paper, and he said, you can spend a couple days or a week doing this. And he said, but I want you to write out what your priorities are, like what's number one, what's number two, what's number three, and just make a list. Because later on, what you're going to find is that one or two of these priorities are going to tug at each other, and you're going to have to make a decision which one is going to get priority. And if you've made that decision ahead of time, it's a lot easier. So figure out where your relationship with God is, and figure out where your job is, and figure out where your wife is, and where your kids are, and write that on your list, and put it there. When you finally come up with your list of priorities, he said, I want you to sign it. If you're married, give it to your spouse. If you're single, give it to a friend that can hold you accountable. If you're have a job or whatever, you may sign it and give it to your boss. I just want to let you know where my job lies on the list of priorities, right? And fill that out, and that way you kind of make that decision. Now that I am a grown-up and I have a wife and kids and family and all of that, there's times where I feel those tensions kind of welling up inside of me. Those times where priorities in my life kind of vie for preeminence. They kind of vie for different levels of importance. And it's harder at certain times, and one of the times that it's really hard for me is during college football season. Because it's the greatest season ever. It's better than winter, spring, summer, or fall. It's college football, y'all. And that rhymed unintentionally. Okay, so it's awesome. I love it. And the thing is, as an Auburn fan, you spend 9 months of your year in anticipation of what will be, and there's only 3 months of the year in which those anticipations and hopes can get dashed. And so you want to see all of that. And as Tennessee fans, you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, stick with me. So we understand what it's like, and so on Saturdays during college football season, there's one place that I want to be, and that's on my couch watching college football. And I could watch it from start to finish all day long. It doesn't matter who's playing. I love it because it's the greatest season in the world. But there are times that there's other obligations. It's a Saturday. My family has stuff that they're going to do, and so I won't watch college football because I'll go and watch a gymnastics meet, or sit all day at a softball tournament, or something along those lines. Go see a piano recital. And so there's times where I have to realize that yesterday was one of those days that was just so difficult for me because I really felt that tug. Because yesterday my wife woke up and she declared that we as a family, or that her and the girls in particular, were going to be going out to Reelfoot Lake to arts and crafts. And she looked at me. She even gave me an out. I love her. She said, you don't have to go. You can stay here all day long and watch college football if that's what you want to do. Now, initially, I shut my door. I thought this might be one of those wife tricks, that they give you sometimes. But it wasn't. It wasn't. She was legit. But inside of me, I felt this tension rise up because look at my girls and my wife, and I know I may not have that much time with them. They're going to graduate and move on or whatever it is, and I don't want to miss out on experiences. I want to enjoy kind of life with them. So I walked out in the bathroom where Jody was getting ready, and I went, I'm going, right? Because you have to gear up for it. You don't just go. If you have not been to arts and crafts yet, let me just kind of see if I can explain it to you. If Martha Stewart and the Obion County Fair were to have a child at the lake and then invite everyone they know, that's what arts and crafts is over there. It's this great mixture of people that are really super talented, some that really aren't very talented at all, and funnel cakes, all in one place. And so we went and we endured because my priorities were different. My priorities said that time with my girls is more important than sitting at home and watching college football. Now the thing is, I bet you had these kind of crises and priorities as well. Yours may not have been as frivolous as you think college football versus arts and crafts may be. Yours may be, what is the relationship between my job and my family? Who takes priority, my spouse or my child? Where does the priority lie? Between my mama and daddy and my spouse, right? How does all of that work? And you feel those tensions. And if we talk about it, like just think about it just a minute, you'll feel those tensions kind of well up inside of you and rise up inside of you. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's Christ's priority of what is going to be the most important priority. Now, here's where we're going to go with this today. This is why it's an important conversation. Because, see, last week we began talking about the gospel and how amazing it is and the freedoms that come because of the gospel. Essentially, the gospel, what it does is it sets you free from law, it sets you free from sin, it sets you free from fear, and these freedoms are absolutely so amazing that we have our responsibility to want to tell other people about it. But one of the things that I think may hinder us in this conversation is the fact that we live in a very free country. And I'm thankful that we do. We live in the United States of America, the greatest country, in my opinion, in the history of the world. And we have these freedoms that are given to us by God, that are protected by our government. And so growing up, especially in the Deep South, growing up, what I was taught was that we take those freedoms that men fought and bled and died for so that we could have. And we're so thankful and we hold them very close to ourselves. And we don't let anyone take them from us. Because if we were to release those freedoms, we may never get them back again. At least not without a great deal of sacrifice. When we start talking about Christian freedoms, it's very easy for us to want to do that same thing. Grab those freedoms and pull them back in and hold them very tight and refuse to let them go under any circumstances. Because if we let those freedoms go, we may not ever get them back. The problem is that there may be a time, in fact, there probably already have been times, where our freedoms in Christ and our responsibility to share the gospel of Christ find themselves vying for preeminence in our life. And we're asked the question, not necessarily in words, but we have to answer the question, which is going to be most important to me? Which is going to be the highest priority to me? The gospel or my freedoms? The gospel or my freedoms? If you're like me, we start asking that question, you feel the tension rising. You're not quite certain where it is that you should land. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a portion of a letter that a guy named Paul wrote to a church in Corinth. Paul wrote about half the New Testament, and this portion of this letter we're going to look at is a pretty famous portion. In fact, even if you haven't been to church, there's a part of it that you've probably heard before. And as we look at it, Paul is going to help us work through this tension and work through this question of which takes a priority, my freedom or the gospel, my freedom or the gospel. And what we may find is that it causes some more tension to rise in us, and it may be very difficult for us to kind of swallow. In fact, if you're here today and you're a follower of Jesus Christ, I want to just go ahead and put you on notice, okay? If you're like me or any of the other Christians I spoke to this week about this message, this may be difficult for you to understand at first. It may even cause you to push back just a little bit and say not so nice things about your pastor on social media. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause before you do that, and I want you to search the Word of God. And I want you to ask yourself, what does it say about this tension? Because that's what we're going to try our best to present today. And it may just be that we've gotten some priorities a little bit out of whack. Now, if you're here today and you're not following Jesus, let me tell you how excited I am that you're here. Because for whatever reason, at some point in time, you pushed back from faith, you pushed back from church, and it may very well be that the reason you did is because you ran into some Christians that have gotten these priorities out of whack. You ran into Christians that valued maybe not necessarily a bad thing, but just at the wrong time, the wrong thing. And as a result, you said, I don't want to have anything to do with that. In fact, the only reason you're here today is because there's some cute girl that showed up, or Mama and Papa told you that y'all would come, or somebody invited you to lunch, or whatever it was, and you showed up and you got suckered in, and now you're having to listen to me talk for the next 30 minutes. If that was you, then what I encourage you to do is just for a moment, just for the next few minutes, lean into what we're going to talk about and see if you can't actually discern from Paul's letters what it is he wants Christians to look like. And would you reconsider the gospel today? Not because Christians are perfect, because we're far from it, but because the gospel is perfect. And the gospel has the power to save you too. So, as we look into this letter, I wonder if we wouldn't just open up our hearts and minds to the Spirit of God, allow Him to speak directly to us. We're going to be, if you want to follow along, in your Bibles. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And because this can get a little bit confusing along the way, we're going to make sure we put all of the words up on the screen so you can follow along with us there. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning in verse 19, right in the middle of this letter that Paul has written, he says this, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone." Now, we understand this freedom that Paul is talking about, especially if you're following Jesus Christ. Paul is going, I have a freedom that separates me or frees me from the law. It frees me from sin. It doesn't mean that there's not a certain way I should behave, because ultimately I know that my sin will destroy me. So I still want to be obedient, but my relationship with God now sets me free from the law. No longer does my actions define my relationship with God. Jesus' action defines my relationship with God. This is incredible news, and it sets me free, Paul says. But although I'm free, he would come on, I'm going to intentionally make myself a slave to everyone. I'm going to put myself in submission to them. I'm going to become radically committed to their advancement and their well-being, and I am going to put the other ahead of myself. I am becoming subject or servant to them. You with me? Now, this is not a concept that is foreign to us. On some level, we understand this, don't we? So let's say that you have just bought a brand new car, and you've been making car payments on it for a little while. And that payment is $300, $500, $7 a month, whatever it may be. And you're paying that to the bank, and you know, like, man, it sure would be nice to not have that money going to the bank, to have that money in my account to spend on whatever it is that I want to spend on. And the time comes, and you kind of get rid of that last car payment, and you're free from that burden. You're free from that. Now you own this car that is already depreciated in value by half. Like, you own this vehicle, right? And you're so excited about it that you finally have become free, and you have an extra $300, $500, $700 a month. That's there now in your bank account. And you're free to do anything you want with it. You're free to go blow it all arts and crafts. You're free to go increase your grocery budget and get the brand name ramen noodles. Like, whatever it is you want to do, you're free to do that. Now imagine you say, I'm free to spend this money however I want, but what I'm going to do is, instead of making car payments to a bank or to a dealership, I'm going to make car payments to myself. That same amount of money that I was paying to the bank every month, I'm just going to shove into a bank account so that the next time I have to buy a car, because there will be a next time, I won't have to finance as much, or I'll be able to pay cash for it. Because although I'm free to spend that money however I want, I discipline myself to not. I discipline myself I put myself under some self-made rules. Maybe you experienced this when you went to college. You finally got out of mom and dad's house, and you're living in a dorm, or you're living in an apartment, wherever it is that you went to school, and you're there, and all of a sudden you're free. There's nobody there going, hey, did you do your homework tonight? There's nobody there saying, hey, you really shouldn't stay up this late. You've got class at 8 a.m. There's no one there saying, get up and go to class, right? And throwing glasses of water on you, like my dad when I was in high school. Like there's nobody doing that. And so guess what? You don't have to do your homework. You don't ever have to go to class. You can stay up late every night if you want to. You're free to do that. But if you are smart, maybe it wasn't until your second go around to college you can figure this out. If you figure it out, you go, no, wait, that's not for my own best interest. I know that I'm going to limit my freedom. Although I'm free, I'm going to set a bedtime and try to stick to it. And only stay up all night on the weekends. Or I'm going to set my alarm and get up so I won't be late to class. I'm going to set 2 alarms. Or I'm going to set an alarm in the bathroom so I have to get up and go turn it off. Like, whatever it is, you set these rules in place, and you limit your freedoms for your own benefit. And why in the world would Paul then tell us to take our Christian freedoms, right, and put ourselves back under the yoke of slavery? Look at the second half of the verse, and he'll give us a hint. He says this, I do it to win as many as possible. Here's something that's really, really, really cool. You see, the gospel, in fact, if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, this is, I think, a reason to give it a chance. The gospel is not only about my own benefit. It's about how I can leverage the gospel for other people's benefits. So you're saved not just so you can get your get out of hell free card. You're saved so that now you can tell other people about it as well. Paul recognizes that there are other people that are going to come in my life that I'm going to have an opportunity to share the gospel with. and if I'm just out flaunting my freedoms all over the place, then they may never hear the message of Jesus. So although I'm free, I'm going to make myself a slave to everyone. So this last week and this coming week, I've had the privilege of working with the backpack program here in Obion County and Union City, and it's a program that Crosswind has been involved with for a while. And typically what happens is everything runs smoothly until it doesn't run smoothly anymore, and then we get a call and we try to help and we try to network with other churches and those sorts of things. And so this last week, we found out that all of the backpack program in the county has been distributed back to the guidance counselors in the schools, and which is fine. That's absolutely fine. But what that meant is that individual guidance counselors now are responsible for raising money and getting the food and packing the bags, and so it's just an added level of stress. And so when we found out about it, we said, listen, we should get involved. And we should help them. So we've been networking with other churches to try to get churches involved in the schools, and we've been sitting down with business leaders and city government officials and that sort of thing to try to help raise funds and do all that. And here's what I know, right? I have a really important message when I sit down with these people. There are boys and girls in our county that don't have anything to eat from lunch on Friday to breakfast on Monday. And some of them don't have ovens or stoves in their house. Some don't have microwaves in their home. And so what we do through the backpack program is we try to provide food for them to go home in their backpack that they can eat, that whether mom and dad give them anything, these kids are not going to be starving over the weekend without food. It's an important message that I want everyone to hear. But you want to know what's interesting? When I walk into the office of city government officials, or when I walk into the office of the business owner, or I walk into the office of a principal or assistant principal or a guidance counselor, they look at me and they size me up. It's not because they're bad people, that's because you do it too, and we do it. It's natural to look at people and size them up. And here's the thing, if they size me up and write me off before I ever deliver my message, then they don't get to hear how important my message is. You understand? If they size me up and write me off for whatever reason. And so what I'm very aware of is the way I present myself, the way I'm organized, and the way I communicate, although it shouldn't matter, it does. And we have a very important message in the backpack program, and if I present it in an irrelevant way, then they will never hear that very relevant message. Now here's the thing, come on, as Christians, we have the most relevant message in the world. We have the most powerful message. It can change people's eternity. But if we if we put barriers in the way, if we put obstacles in the way, if we put things that are there that can cause a hindrance to the gospel, then they may never ever hear our message because something else that we've done has been put in the way of the gospel message. Paul says, I'm going to be a slave to all men in order that I might win some. Earlier he used that word, but I just used hindrance. It's actually a strong military term. It means to break up the road. It talks about soldiers that are marching to war, or armies that are marching to war, and the people at the back of the line would break up the road behind them, destroy the road behind them, so that their enemies couldn't use the same road to travel. It would make it much more difficult. Paul says that I don't want my freedoms to break up the road for people to the gospel. I don't want my freedoms to put hindrances, road closed signs, barriers in the way of people hearing the gospel. So, I'm going to limit my freedoms in order that I might win some. He goes on to give us some examples. And this is where it would get a little confusing, so stick with me. You'll see in just a minute when I read this verse. Verse 20, he says, To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. That's a mouthful. It's a big sentence. Let's see if we can work our way through it. You know that Christianity came out of Judaism. That Jesus was a Jewish Messiah that came to the Jewish people who offered the gospel of peace to all who would believe. You with me? And so there were groups of people that the early apostles were trying to reach with the gospel that were Jews. What that meant was that they grew up learning the law. 613 of them, to be precise. Not only the law, but they learned the oral tradition. They learned all of those other little do this, don't do that kind of things along the way that Judaism teaches. And the law, or these practices, became so important to the Jews that it actually became a measuring rod of my relationship with God. my relationship with God is based on my behavior. It's based on what I do or what I don't do. Now the gospel comes in and sets people free from that. But they already had all these Jews they were trying to reach that bought into this old system. They had Gentiles who were God-fearers, meaning that they practiced Judaism. You even had people that had converted to Judaism, who, although they weren't Jews, they found themselves under the law of Moses, under the Hebraic law. And so, as a result, I was going to observe the Hebraic law so that my relationship with God would be okay. Paul says the gospel sets us free for all that. But for the sake of the gospel, to the Jews and those under the law, I'm going to become like a Jew and like one under the law. In Paul's day, that meant I'm going to watch what I eat. I'm going to watch what I drink. And I'm going to watch where I do it. Because for them, it wasn't just a matter of ceremonial and cleanliness. It wasn't just a matter of religion. This had become a part of their culture. This type of dietary restriction became a part of their culture. But let me see if I can explain it this way. In this afternoon, we are going to go out for fun at the farm. You all should come. All ages. It's not just for kids. There's going to be all kinds of stuff. We get to feed pigs, and we get to fish, and we get to eat pork tacos. Now, here's the thing. We talk about eating pork tacos, and I've never, ever had pork on a taco, but I am fired up about it. Right? And here in Tennessee, we will talk about some pork because bacon, right? And everybody and their brother feels like they have the best pulled pork, and they're all wrong. But regardless of that, like, we love talking about pork. It's a staple of our diet, and we don't think anything about slaughtering a pig and eating it. But what if we were in a community that was predominantly Orthodox Jew? What if in a community where we were trying to reach out to the Muslims in that area? It isn't even just a matter of religious scruples. It's a matter of what they find tasty in their diet. Like, the thought for some of them to even eat a pig or touch a pig is just gross. Like it's so much for unclean. Like, my stomach just can't even stand it. It turns. They might say things like, have you ever looked at a pig? Have you ever touched a pig? Why in the world would you eat that? And you and I don't think anything about it, right? We take our shrimp with bacon wrapped around it. They go, it's just, and they might feel nauseous, throwing up. It's just disgusting them to give you, put the shoe on the other foot. Imagine you and I got into a plane and we flew to Indonesia. And we had Indonesian Christians that were over there, and they said, listen, we're having our own version of fun at the farm in Indonesia, and we're going to serve some tacos. And we show up, and they're in different dishes. They point to us, and they go, that one right there, that's dog meat. And this one right here, that's rat meat. And even at me mentioning that, some of you are going, right? And if we were to serve it up to you right here, I have all the confidence in the world that this would be a neo-Roman vomitorium right here in the middle of our sanctuary. See, here's the thing. It's not that those things make us unclean in our relationship with God. We know that. We know that in certain parts of the world, those things are perfectly acceptable to eat and maybe even delicacies. But to us, it just turns our stomach. Like, you've never even eaten it that you're aware of. And yet it just turns our stomach. There's something that's detestable about it to that. Here's what Paul is getting. This is so important. He goes, listen, there are times where your freedom allows you to eat or your freedom allows you to drink or whatever, but for the sake of the gospel, we're not going to do it. In fact, to sum up in words, what he's saying is this. This is the freedom to do what we say no to. The freedom to do that we say no to. It's a freedom to indulge. It's a freedom to do. But for the sake of the gospel, we're going to say no to. It's the example that might resonate most with us in this culture is when it comes to drinking alcohol. We know that the Bible only condemns drunkenness. It doesn't condemn drinking alcohol at all. But in certain parts of the world, certain parts of the Deep South, and even here to some degree, this is a big-time issue for a lot of folks. And they just come to believe culturally that that's something that you don't do or that you stay away from. But if we were to go to other parts of the country, we were to go to other parts of the world, it would be a non-issue. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether you should or you should not. What I am trying to tell you is this. When you indulge in that freedom and then display it for the world to see, you run the risk of putting an obstacle or barrier in the way of the gospel. And what Paul would say is, look, it's the freedom to do that we're going to say no to. We're free, but for the sake of the gospel, I'm going to limit that freedom, at least publicly. At at least publicly, I'm going to limit it. Why? Because the gospel is always more important than my freedom. Gospel is always more important than my freedom. So to those that are under the law, man, I'm going to become like one under the law so as to win those under the law. Whew. He goes on, and in the next verse, he gives us another example. Verse 21, he says this, to those not having the law, I become like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law. Now, this is the part of the verse that I didn't grow up hearing. We didn't listen to this part. We love the fact that there's freedoms to do that we say no to. This is kind of the other end of it. I'll go ahead and tell you what he's saying here. What he's saying is that there's a freedom that we have to not do that we say yes to. A freedom that we have to not do that we say yes to. I'll say it one more time. A freedom that we have to not do that we say yes to. It means that if we want to reach people with the gospel, we're going to have to engage them where they are. And it may mean that puts us in circumstances or situations that we're not very comfortable with. I told you guys that a couple months ago. We were having a conversation amongst our staff about reaching college students. We desperately want to reach college students over at UTM, and we just love them to death. We want them to know the life of Jesus better and engage with a local church, somewhere near them. What we started thinking about is, how we've been trying to reach them. And what we've been saying is, we've been going to places like the BCM, and we've been going to hang out at the university, and we think about all the things that we could do that would get lost people to come to interact with us. And it dawns on us in the middle of the conversation that if we want to have unchurched college students engage with the gospel, we're going to have to go where they are. And so Matt and I loaded up in my little red Jeep, and we went and had lunch at Cadillacs. And it was crazy. There was nobody there. We knew that. We just wanted to see what it would look like if we ever came back into that environment. But we were like, listen, we know that if we're going to reach them, we're going to have to engage them where we are. So it may mean that we have to go and play some pool. It may mean that we have to go into an atmosphere that we're not super crazy about. Listen, I don't like enclosed, smoky places with big crowds. It drives me crazy. And drunk people, don't get me started on drunk people. Man, come on. Right? It's no fun. It's no fun for anybody. Right? That's not something that I'm excited about or something that I'm pumped up about. And my freedom in Christ allows me to not do that. You with me? But I will limit my freedom to not do, and I will say yes to it for the sake of the gospel. You got to go and engage, be where they are, and do what it is you've asked them to do. Jody reminded me in between services, we have a friend of ours that is a journeyman in the Middle East. We can't even tell you where she is. She's somewhere over there. And one of the things that we had talked to her about that she had learned in her training was that she had to learn how to wear the head covering that women were required to wear in that area. And I thought to myself, and Jody was around me, she's like, listen, she's free to not do that. But she limits that freedom for the sake of the gospel because she knows if she doesn't do that, she doesn't get a hearing with those people. They won't even talk to her or listen to her. And so although she's free to do, free to not do, she says, yes, I will do that for the sake of the gospel. Because the gospel is more important than my freedoms. Gospel is more important than my freedom. Now, he's going to give us one more example. And this one gets a little bit hairy. There in verse 22, he says this, to the weak, I become weak to win the weak. We just get this little bitty phrase. And the reason that we might get a little confused by is up to this point, he's been talking about non-Christians. He's been talking about people that are not believers. To those that are Jews and under the law, they're not believers, I'm going to put myself under the law so that they'll hear my message. To those that are free from the law, I'm going to become free to the law so that they might hear my message. Now all of a sudden, he uses this phrase, weak. And earlier in the chapter, he's used that phrase to denote Christians who are maybe just a little bit overzealous with regard to the law. Maybe just a little bit legalistic. Maybe they haven't yet come into the full freedom that the gospel has delivered them. In some way, in some reason, their relationship with God is still based upon their behavior. It doesn't mean they're not saved. It just means that they're still in that process. And what I love about this passage right here is it's this. Paul recognizes that we, as believers who have come into the freedom that is found in the gospel, we may not stop them from being saved. That's not what he's talking about. But we may hinder their spiritual growth. We may put barriers in the way to them becoming more like Jesus. We may be absolutely correct in our view, and our point may be absolutely correct. But what Paul is saying here is this: never sacrifice influence with another believer in order to make a point. Never sacrifice influence in order to make a point. Why? Because the gospel is too important to put up a road closed sign. The gospel is too important to put barriers in the way. Paul might have said it this way: you've got to learn to prioritize people over your freedoms. In fact, he may use this phrase: it's the right to do that is never important as the who. The right to do is never as important as the who. The freedom is not ever as important as the person. Jesus modeled this. Never once did Jesus prioritize freedom or rules over people. He never prioritized freedom over people. Do you want to know how that's true? Because Jesus Christ, though in the very nature of God, did not consider God, the equality of God, something to be grasped, but he emptied himself of his divinity, whatever in the world that means. And he took upon the form of a servant and became obedient. This is God who became obedient. And he died on the cross. Let me tell you, Jesus didn't have to do that. Jesus would have been absolutely right to not do that. But Jesus prioritized a relationship with us over the rules. He prioritized a relationship with us over the law. He prioritized a relationship with us over his freedom and over his rights as God. He modeled it for us. And so many times we like to point our fingers at the Christian down the street or point our fingers at the church down there, and well, they don't believe, and they do this, and they have to do this, and they don't have this, and they this, and this, and this, and that, and the other, and whatever it is we may be. And what Paul says is that is doing nothing but providing a barrier or an obstacle to people becoming more like Jesus and people coming to Jesus in the first place. And the gospel is never as important as your freedom. Paul said, I'm going to limit my freedom. And just in case we missed it along the way, he kind of sums up his entire teaching in the previous couple verses with this part. This is the famous part. This is the part that you've heard. He says, I have become all things to all people, so that by all means I might possibly save some. Look at the word all, how many times it's used there. I have become all things to all people, so that by all means possible. Let me tell you, Paul would never say that we should go and use the gospel as an excuse to live in licentiousness or sin. He would never say that the gospel should be used as an excuse to go and just do whatever it is I want to. And because I'm trying to reach people that are drunks, it means I should be a drunk. That's not what he's saying. That's not all he's saying. He's saying, though, anything short of sin, anything short of sin, I'm going to do. Because although I have a freedom to do, I'm going to say no to it. And although I have a freedom to not do, I'm going to say yes to it. And my freedom to do is never as important as the who. And I'm going to value relationships much more than I value my freedoms and my rights. I'm going to become all things to all people. In order that I win some, in the last verse, he sums it up for us. He says this: I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I might share in its blessing. Why does he do it? Because the gospel is so important. Listen, folks, if the gospel has the power of life, if the gospel can change people's lives and transform them and secure their eternity, if the gospel can give us the Holy Spirit and a peace and a joy that's not linked to our circumstances, why wouldn't we want other people to have it? And anything short of sin, I will do in order to reach people with the gospel. Because my freedoms are not near as important as the gospel. And my gospel always takes priority. What does that mean for us? As we go back into our places of business, and we go back to school, we go out these doors in front of the farm this afternoon, whatever it is, what does that mean for us? It means I want you to begin asking yourself a question. That question is this: what is it that I'm doing? What is the way that I'm portraying my life that could be a roadblock or a hindrance to the gospel? What are the things that I'm saying? What are the things that I'm doing? What are the things that I'm posting that are distracting people from the gospel. Because everything we do will either attract them to or distract them from the good news of Jesus Christ. And I wonder if we would begin asking ourselves that question and then being honest with ourselves. Several years ago, I was still living in Alabama. The courthouse in our town was right behind our church. I had gone in there one day to do something, I don't know, pay taxes on my tag or something along those lines. I was talking with the ladies that were there working behind the counter, and I was inviting them to church, and they knew who I was, and so the church came up. They said, "Listen, I'm never going to come to your church." Well, thank you very much, right? Like, why is that? And she said, "Listen, one of your church members," she gave me a name. He was a deacon at our church. He served as a trustee of the church. He had been in the church since he was a child. So he came in here the other day, and there was a dispute about something. She said it was a tag or tax or something like that. And he wanted us to do something, and the lady behind the counter, she couldn't do it. It was outside of her job description. Like, she just couldn't do it. She didn't have the legal ability to make happen what he needed to make happen. And she said he threw a fit. The Powell family would say he turned his goat loose. Right? And she said he cussed her up one side and down the other. And he said terrible things about her personally. And he attacked the system, and he ranted and raved, and it seemed like forever. And everybody in here heard him, and everybody in here knew who he was, and everybody in here knew where he went to church. And I'll tell you right now, if those are the type of people you have in your church, I'm never gonna go. And I stood there, and I wasn't able to argue. I'm sorry. Here's what I want you to recognize. The way that you act to that server that brings your food to the table, the way that you act to that person at the water department, the way you interact with those public servants that come and pick up your garbage, the way that you interact when you're at Walmart or at Lowe's, the way that you interact with other believers, it will either distract from or attract people to the gospel. And what I want to ask you is, what I'm doing publicly, is it attracting people to or distracting people from the good news of Jesus Christ? And if it's distracting from, then what Paul says is you may be free to do it, or you may be free to not do it, and you've got to limit that freedom. Why? For the sake of the gospel. Because one day you may get an opportunity to stand up and share your faith with them, and if they've already sized you up and written you off, they may never hear the most relevant message the world has ever heard. I'm not telling you that you should post certain things on social media or shouldn't. I'm not trying to tell you what activities you engage in or don't engage in. That's between you and God. But I wonder if you begin asking the question and running everything you say and do before you hit enter and before the words come out of your mouth, when you run it through the grid of, is this distracting from or attracting to the gospel? Because the gospel is never more important than my freedom. The gospel is never, I said that. It's ruining the moment. The gospel is always more important than freedom. The gospel is always more important. The gospel always takes priority over your freedom. Did you begin asking that question? Did you begin evaluating your life, your public life, by that criteria? Now, if you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, feel free to disregard all that. What I want to ask you is this. If you've pushed back from the faith because you ran into some Christians that valued their freedom more highly than the gospel, I wonder if you would reconsider. Because the power of the gospel is greater than all of my mistakes and all of our mistakes. And it's more amazing than I could possibly imagine. And I'm sorry that sometimes I don't get it. And I'm sorry that sometimes we don't get it. But I pray that you would just give it another chance and you just reconsider. And you would at least open up the door to having another conversation. If that's the day, I want to invite you. Go to the Welcome Center and fill out that connection card. Go to the app and fill out the connection card. Call me, email me, text me. I would love to talk with you about what the gospel really requires of us and about the gloriousness that the gospel can bring through freedom in Christ. So I wonder today, if you're that individual, if you reconsider the gospel, and if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, I wonder if you start evaluating everything you do by this grid. Does it distract from or attract you to the gospel of Jesus Christ? Because the gospel is always more important than my freedom. The gospel is always more important than my freedom. Sometimes there's a freedom to do that we say no to. Sometimes there's a freedom to not do that we say yes to. And our freedom to do is never, ever, ever as important as the who. God, I thank you for this Bible text. I thank you that you dealt with Paul's heart and you're dealing with my heart. God, I pray that you would help those of us that are followers of you to apply these scriptures and these truths to our lives. God, I pray that you would empower us to live out these truths, that we would stop putting barriers or obstacles in the way to people understanding the gospel and hearing the gospel message, but that instead we would clear the way. That means limiting whatever freedom we have to limit. That means saying no to the things we have to say no to and saying yes to the things we have to say yes to. And even though we're free to do, we'll say no. And even though we're free to not do, we may say yes. And we're always going to value relationships ahead of our freedom. God, we're going to need your power to help us do that. We're going to need your help. And so, God, I pray that you would come and give us the wisdom to recognize the areas of our life where we are distracting people from the gospel. And then give us the courage to remove them, no matter what it may be. It may mean that we don't deal with customer service people anymore. It may mean that we don't get on social media anymore. It may mean that we avoid certain places or certain things because we don't want to distract from the gospel. It may mean that there's places that we now need to go, people we need to engage, ways we need to utilize social media in order to reach people with the good news of Jesus Christ. So God, give us the wisdom to recognize them and the courage to do whatever it takes to reach people with the gospel. Now, for those of us that are here that are far from you, who may be pushed back from the good news of Jesus Christ, Father, I pray that you would begin to speak to their hearts, begin to draw them back towards you. God, that they might recognize that the gospel of Jesus Christ is bigger than any of the obstacles that are in their way. And as we seek to remove them, I pray, God, that you would help them to overcome them. I pray that you would help them to reconsider faith in you, because you alone can save. God, I pray that as we leave this place, you would empower us to do your will, empower us to advance your kingdom, and remind us every day that the gospel is always more important than my freedom. The gospel is always more important than my freedom. Now, God, help us. I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys so much for coming this week. We'll see you next time.